This is something I'm very excited about. We have Jake Solomon, who worked on last year's excellent XCOM Enemy Unknown, and Julian Gollop, who worked on the original XCOM UFO Defense back in 1993. They've never met each other. We're going to get them in the same room and talk about this venerable franchise. We have Jake Solomon, who worked on last year's exceptional XCOM Enemy Unknown. And we have Julian Gollop, who worked on 1993's XCOM UFO Defense. Thank you both for your time today.
Thank you.
And this is the first time the two of you have met.
This is a big honor for me.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. This is, see, I'm nervous. I'm like twitching. I'm like, I feel, yes, this is a wonderful, wonderful experience.
So, Jake, I think having worked on last year's XCOM kind of demonstrates that you have an affection for the original XCOM game.
I hope that does, yeah. I hope that came across.
But Julian, what did you think of last year's XCOM Enemy Unknown?
Well, I think that the whole team at Firaxis did a tremendous job because they created something which was really familiar for people who played the original game, but I think it was quite refreshing and different as well. And I think they did a whole bunch of things which are right, and I really enjoyed playing it.
Oh my God, that's on camera, right?
That is on camera.
I'm going to quit. I'm going to hang up my shoes because that's probably the best professional moment that I've ever had.
That's the back of the box quote, right?
That's right. Leave my shoes on the mat and just walk off.
Julian, when you started out, what did you attempt to accomplish? I mean, obviously the technology was so different and so limited back then, but you did really have this game that had all this player choice as you kind of just built up your way to keep the aliens from killing us.
Yes, well, what I wanted to do was create a game system or a game world where the player felt that they were really fighting against this intelligent alien menace. And the game itself had a dynamic which was not completely scripted or predefined, had random elements in it, but there was always this element of something unexpected, uncertain, and threatening, both in the tactical area of the game and in the geoscape area of the game. So that was one of my main objectives, I think, with the whole design.
And obviously you guys saw the value in that kind of dynamic within it, within those systems, and really respected that. I mean, was there ever a discussion whether or not you were going to go in a new direction?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I think that the neat thing, I'm actually really happy about this because, XCOM is my favorite game of all time. And so when I set out, that's what I wanted to make. I wanted to make an exact recreation of that game. And we didn't end up there, and I think it's nice because I think the two games stand side by side. Like, certainly the one that was made last year does not in any way replace the original, because the one we made last year has a lot more discrete choices, I think, in it. And then that's different from Julian's XCOM, where it's much more of this simulation, and it does have a sense of dread that I think is really, that is just really hard to recreate. Like I always say, the original XCOM is like one of those games with like a soul. Like you just turn it on, you hear the music, and it just creates that feeling. And I think that is something I don't know, I'm always in awe of. I can still play the original XCOM, and it just gives you that sense of tension and dread, and that's all the way through. Tactical layer, strategy layer as well. It's amazing. But
it has some downsides as well, because with the original XCOM, the player had so much choice about what he did and how he did it that actually one of the greatest fears is, what the hell am I supposed to do as a player? It's very difficult. One thing I think you did very well with the new game is that every choice in the game that you make has some clear trade-off. If I do this, then I'm going to lose out on that, but if I do this, then I'm going to gain this.
Right.
And the philosophy is great because it means that every decision in the game that you're making is an interesting decision for the player. And that really comes across very well in the new game.
Well, there's also that sense of discovery of, I'm going to have to start making sacrifices. And that is something rarely have to see in a game. I did feel that, somewhat in the original XCOM as well, that every step I'm taking, I don't know initially, but it could lead to my doom, or it could be the best decision that I make. And it's a fascinating effect upon the player.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's interesting that those of us who have played the original so much, like to us, those decisions actually are obvious and discrete. But I think if somebody were to play the original XCOM now, they would, it would be difficult for them to understand what decisions they're making. But for those of us who still play and who've played it so much, like those decisions are there and they're discrete and we know what strategy you should do. And so to us, it's the same, we know what those choices are and we know what the trade-offs are. And so, the goal was to make the beauty of XCOM, apparent to anyone if they just sit down and play it.
But I think you really nailed the philosophy correctly with, Sid Meier says that games are all about making interesting decisions.
Right.
And he is absolutely correct about that. One of the difficulties with a kind of free-form strategy game is you can't guarantee that the player is always going to have something interesting to do. And I don't think you can make games the way we made the original XCOM anymore. I don't think anybody would get away with it.
It is interesting. It was last year. I was doing a panel with you guys at PAX. I was like, "Oh, I'm going to download it. I'm going to play it again." And in this new digital era, you don't have manuals.
No.
And I was suddenly presented with an interface that was it made sense back in 1993. But I was like, I don't know, I can't remember how to do this. I mean, I'd love to hear just sort of what it was like to make that game. How many people did you use? And was there another model that was kind of influencing how you built it?
No, I mean, we were going out on a limb really with the game design on this. It was just myself, my brother Nick, who was doing programming. And it was really just the two of us developing the game. We had 2 artists at Microprose. But we had a very interesting input from the guys at Microprose at the beginning of the project because we took to them a demo for a game we call Laser Squad 2. It's just a tactical part of the game, basically. And they said to us, look, this is not really a Microprose game. We want you to make this, a big game. And I thought, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, I felt like saying to him, well, look, how big do you want it? This big or that big? How long is a piece of string? So we had some more discussion, and they were saying, well, look, we want it to be set on Earth because people can relate emotionally to Earth. Yeah. Saving the Earth is cool. I said, well, it's got to have a research tree, it's got to have something like a Civilopedia, and it felt to me, well, hold on, it seems like they want something which is a bit like Civilization mixed with our Laser Squad tactical thing. So immediately I came up with the idea of, let's have a strategic view, this geoscape, where this is the main view where you control everything. But it was one of the guys at Microprose, Pete Morland, he said, well, how about we make the game about UFOs? And immediately he said that, everything started coming into place about, yes, UFOs invading, reverse engineering. He was a big fan of Jerry Anderson's UFO series. I don't know if anybody's watched it these days.
I went back and watched it once I heard that.
Yeah, the whole basic idea of XCOM as an organization comes from that TV series with Shadow, which basically in the TV series you had interceptors on the moon, you had interceptors flying around, and if the aliens got all the way to the planet's surface, you had guys sending out interceptors on the ground to try and get the aliens before they did any nasty business. And
it is fascinating for someone who loves XCOM so much. It's fascinating to see that and see the places where it sort of links up. Yeah, the moon interceptors and things like that.
Yeah, so actually all of the input came from the guys at Microprose UK, but I had to really figure out how the whole game fitted together, and I came up with a design in about 2 or 3 weeks. 12 pages of paper.
And how long was your design document?
Well, me being a programmer, I think my producer told you I'm terrible at them. So, 2 pages, but it only took me 5 years. So, 2 to 3 weeks. I was reimagining that game, and it took me 5 years. So.
I think also what I found so exciting about the new XCOM is it's a classic game design. The turn-based strategy game, which I would like to see made into perpetuity. But it is something that almost sounds archaic, and that a lot of turn-based games existed because the technology couldn't handle stuff happening in real time. And,
yes.
And to see that kind of that evolution, to then turn that into something of value is it's unique.
Right. I mean, turn-based games have a long lineage to, I mean, board games. It allows you to make decisions and to take the time to make those decisions. And it's funny because for me, yeah, turn-based games are my favorite type of game. And obviously I come from the studio that is still doing Civilization, and so for us, yeah, that's something that's in our studio DNA where we made real-time games before, but yeah, we love the fact that turn-based allows you to, it's actually, again, along the lines of what Julian was talking about, where it makes the decisions discrete, So when you're playing a real-time game, you actually may not know, even if it's based on reflexes, or even if it's an RTS where the decisions happen a little bit down the line, A turn-based game allows you to take all the decisions and make them discrete and say, okay, this is your one turn. If you move there, these are the trade-offs, and we can make that very clear to the player. So it sort of falls along the line of what Julian was talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, real-time games, to some extent, you're battling with the interface, and turn-based games are pure game to me, and this is what makes them much more interesting to play. I'm still working on turn-based games, believe it or not. Unfortunately, around about 1996, turn-based games were pretty much killed off by the RTS boom. Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's a great shame because I regard that period as the real heyday of this grand strategy game. There was Civilization, XCOM, Master of Orion, Master of Magic, all of which were fantastic games. And that kind of game just died out. There's a few still surviving, but it's a shame because
it's mainly these guys.
Yeah.
And I mean the new XCOM game is like a phoenix rising from the ashes because it's like a brand new. It is. I mean, if you look at the way the XCOM series developed, even back then when we had XCOM Interceptor and XCOM Alliance, which was in development, Microprose had already abandoned turn-based tactical
Interceptor
gameplay.
was the shooter.
That was you were an actual, it was a sort of like X-Wing. You were piloting it.
Yeah, it was like X-Wing. XCOM Alliance was a first-person shooter. It was cancelled. It became XCOM Enforcer, which was a pure
That's what I was thinking.
shooter. Yeah, XCOM Enforcer, which was the last official XCOM game before the new one.
And it's funny because it was never an option to not be turn-based, and luckily, our publisher was fine with it, and they were very supportive. And the fact is, when people say, well, does it have to be turn-based? I always tell them, XCOM does have to be turn-based. And for me, it's because if you don't have turn-based, you do not have character death. Like, you cannot have a real-time game where soldiers that you care about and have invested hours in are being controlled by the computer, and then even if it's not the computer's fault, you are going to, as the player, think it's the computer's fault that person walked into line of fire. If it's not turn-based and the player doesn't have complete control over what happens, that's the only way it seems fair to them, where they can say, I'm the one who made the decision, I know the rules of the game. It's almost like a sport where it's like the rules are known beforehand, I moved into this position, complete control, and that's what makes it possible.
That's a very good point. I mean, underpinning the whole XCOM experience is this strong RPG element. In most RTS games, practically all of units, most of them are completely disposable. But to really invest in your characters, to lose control of what you're doing in a real-time environment, yes, players wouldn't like it. They really wouldn't.
I was just taken aback by the level of enthusiasm for naming the characters. I mean, I knew you could do it. I thought that was a nice touch. But then I just got obsessed with it. I want to name them all after Russian writers and German philosophers.
And the Russian writers are probably glad to die.
And then I'm like, oh no, Heidegger's dead. But I would just see this on social media. Just people were just so proud. You could see this attachment. Yes. And then the discovery, like, oh, they're all going to die before this is over.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, and that's one of those things that in the original XCOM, you knew, like, oh, you should, whenever we would tell people to play, we'd say, like, you have to rename your soldiers, you have to rename your soldiers. And that was something that we knew because of how big of an impact that had on us in the original game. Then, for the one last year, we said, okay, you got to be able to customize them. We want to drive that attachment with your soldier, not in a like a harsh way, but we want you to feel that connection. So we put their country flag on their backs because you're always looking over their back, and You know, they got nicknames once they reach a certain rank, and those things were all meant to sort of to reinforce that connection that you form with those soldiers.
Yeah, I must say that in your game, the character progression is handled absolutely brilliantly. It's very accessible, and the complexity of your characters develops as you go along, and you don't necessarily need to know very much about them initially. And it's really quite well done.
Oh.
I'm really impressed with it.
Well, I mean, I think it's the final thing, just going back to the turn-based strategy of both XCOM games. And we were talking about how when you first played UFO Defense, there was that sense of fear, and I remember that too. But I also know the fear that I was playing in Enemy Unknown, and it was that it's interesting that what on paper looks like the least emotional interactive experience is the one that I think I have the most emotional reaction to.
I think it's so. What I think it's because and I think that's because there's actual loss. Like XCOM will kill your soldiers. Countries will leave XCOM, and just like in the original game, those are irrevocable changes. Your soldiers will not come back to life. Countries will not come back into the organization. And the fact that the game has permanent consequences is what allows the player, because the player knows that, then they say, oh, well, so when I have an actual success against actual odds, it's actually authentic. And I think that creates that real emotion. You know, you feel like you own that experience, and it feels like a real experience, and it just creates that real sense of emotion in you.
But that's the continuous trade-off you have to make. You've got this really great character. You need to use him to win the mission, but you don't want him to die. And it's always on a knife edge, this risk. You know, am I risking too much, or am I not risking enough?
It's the queen in chess. It's the queen. You know?
Exactly.
I mean, how you use them is crucial, and yet at the same time, you're always wanting to make sure you have them.
Yeah, I think the XCOM franchise, or at least your two games, are the pure digital distillation of existential dread. And I want to thank both of you for reminding me of my mortality. Julian, thank you so much for your time. Jake, it's always good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.